Hi everybody, my name is Shritan Chandupatla and I'm going to be giving a presentation over tea and opium, the trade and war behind it. So we're going to be breaking this presentation up into two parts. Part 1 is about the tea trade and part 2 is about the opium war. So tea trade with international affairs, this was a highly sophisticated tea trade of the 19th century and this took place around 1833 to 1834. So the international trade routes can be shown here from Britain to China. And so Great Britain goes around the tip of Africa, all the way to the port of Canton, where all Chinese trade was concentrated. And then there could also be an overland route shown by the blue line. So explaining this picture, during the international trading system, China controlled its trade out of Canton, and it enabled both sides to benefit, mainly Britain and China. So China concentrated its international affairs all to the port of Canton, and Han merchants controlled it, and they were given a royal status by the king in honor of their service. Since China had a monopoly over most of the tea market, it had to have a highly sophisticated network of people getting ready for the international tea trade. And this monopoly really helped China mark up their prices. So Europe also benefited from the luxuries previously known in Europe and the Americas, and this included porcelain, silk, and tea. So as you can see here, we have porcelain, which is the blue cup with designs on it. Silk is the cloth, and we have the tea, which is the kettle. So Han merchants were crucially dependent on, and they had to follow super strict rules. These foreign merchants and their suppliers had to be under really strict control to keep the system under control. So the tea trade was highly organized and super sophisticated and highly efficient. Therefore, supply and demand for Chinese goods rose significantly, and so did Chinese profits. On both sides tea trade, there were monopolies. China was the only one who knew how to produce tea at that time, and Britain was the only one who could purchase so much of China's product. This limited Britain, and also in Britain, the way Britain had a monopoly over the tea was that Britain limited the purchase of tea just to the East India Company, which made it so that no other people in Britain could purchase tea and they could sell it at a really high markup. Britain viewed the trade as a good idea and that the prices would not have to go up for their people if the trade was free. So Britain tried to bypass Han merchants and tried to directly trade with the tea men, and the tea men really wanted to do the same. The tea men would get a better price for their tea if they just tried to sell it to foreigners directly, and the foreigners would also get a lower price if they tended directly toward the tea men. So this is really beneficial on both sides because they could escape the Han merchants' markup, and that markup would, a huge chunk of that would be given back to the government. And at this point, Britain was running really low on its silver storage. China only would accept silver for their tea, and Britain had to think on its feet. Britain came up with a fast and quick solution. And the reason why Britain was running low on their silver storage was that Britain at that time was on its gold standard, so it didn't have silver, but Spain and those other European countries did. So Britain traded gold for silver and that silver for tea in China because China would only accept silver for tea. So as we can see in this illustration, what I'm trying to explain in this illustration is that Britain found a new solution and they decided to sell opium for to the Chinese people for silver, and that silver to the Chinese government for tea. So, as you can see here, Britain is trading the opium for silver, and that silver to for the tea from the Chinese government. However, there is one problem. Opium was illegal in China. So Britain smuggled opium through the tea men, and China was suddenly hooked on opium, mainly caused by the British, and opium which started to ship in by the thousands. But eventually the Chinese government caught on, and they banned all opium and started boycotting it. And this was really bad for the British because that was their only way to get tea. Okay, now we're moving on to part 2, and this is about the Opium War. And there was also a lot of unequal treaties involved on China's behalf between Britain and China. So this takes place around 1833 to 1834. So that boycotting of the opium really triggered the British to start a war on China, and this war was called the Opium War. This war resulted in a peace treaty called the Treaty of Nanking. The Treaty of Nanking ended the First Opium War, but it was unfair and totally unequal to the Chinese. However, according to the treaty, the Chinese had to pay the British for the opium that the British illegally smuggled into the country. So the Chinese had to cede the territory of Hong Kong to the British for 99 years, and this became Britain's international port. One government general stated that 99 years was as good as forever back then, because they knew that Britain was not going to be there for 99 years. But eventually that ended, and today Hong Kong is part of China. Additionally, with this new port, Britain started smuggling in even more opium into the country, which skyrocketed the opium intake of the Chinese youth and the Chinese people. Additionally, according to the tea trade, there had to be reasonable tariffs with the trade, and this tariff was set so low that it became practically free to trade. The legislation and the monopoly of the tea trade ultimately came down to free trade and unfair rules for China. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.